Hello everyone and welcome back to the YouTube audiobook series 4, The Forbidden Truth, written by Abby Matthias. I am Abby and today I will be introducing Chapter 23. If you missed Chapter 22, I would highly suggest going back. A lot happened and we're getting into a very good chapter, so you need to know. Link to the previous video and the playlists for both books are in the description below, and if you are all caught up and ready to go, we will continue on with Chapter 23, The Forbidden Truth.
As Damien made his way to my protector child, I maneuvered myself along the wall and slipped into the hallway where the two doors stood. The one to the right being the bathroom Abby's boyfriend walked out of, and the door on the left being where Miss Haynes was crying. That was the way I had to go. My objective was to enter new territory and keep tabs on a woman having a meltdown about her past. Before entering, though, I leaned my ear towards the wood divider, trying to listen for any sound. There was quiet music playing as the vocalist sang about loss and hauntings. Yet, among the music filling the atmosphere, I could still hear the soft weeps coming from her body. My heart sank again in my chest, hearing her cry. This woman was in the worst kind of pain anyone could feel emotionally. She was still grieving. Making the connections, I cautiously walked through the door in order to enter the room. I was once again within the plain bedroom, yet this time Miss Haynes was sitting on the edge of the bed, with tears streaming down her face. The remaining makeup around her eyes was running down her cheeks while a tissue was clutched in her hand. Loud sniffles were all she breathed while her body jolted from the sharp intakes of air. Just by seeing this female, I could tell she was in shambles, ripped from her existence and placed into a depression that swallowed her whole. I was sure there were two major things running in her head. The first being the fact that her husband was a ghost that haunted her wherever she went, apparently. However, the second was her son's actions and choices to stop with their charade. She was living in torment, and it was all because of this guy's abandonment, leaving this poor family heartbroken and shattered. From those thoughts, I had sympathy for her feelings as I could somewhat imagine being in her shoes. Regardless of my own thoughts, I continued to watch her for a moment before she got up and walked herself over to a random briefcase that she had on her dresser. She turned dials that formulated some numeric code, and once it was correct, the locks unclasped and allowed the top to be opened. Peering into the case from a distance, dust had accumulated over the years as it has been stored away for a while. However, some old folders were laying at the bottom of it, while two other objects laid on top. Yet I couldn't get a good look at them before she ended up pulling them out and into the light. The first commodity I spotted was a pair of rectangular glasses. The glass parts of them were completely covered in debris. However, Miss Haynes took her tissue that she had and wiped every inch of them to reveal their entirety. As I stared at these glasses, they looked extremely familiar to me. I knew those pair of glasses all too well, and I knew exactly who this man was. This was the second man from my deal-making dream. He wore the exact same pair of glasses while he informed me about his family. I remember seeing Miss Haynes within that state and recalling how he was her husband. Not to also forget that I saw a younger version of Damien from when he was little. All of this was for certain, yet I didn't understand why it was all so important to me. As I refocused myself, she was fully sitting on her bed again, wiping away what looked to be a picture frame within her other hand. The back was only facing towards me, so I couldn't get a look at the photograph that was in it. However, that didn't stop me from seeing Miss Haynes' face in reaction to it. Her tears fell faster, while her hand trembled in remorse. It was like I was seeing the very soul of this woman being drained from her slowly, and it pained me once more. I wish there was something more I could do, yet there wasn't. All that I was able to do was watch silently and try to understand more of their broken life. So gathering the courage, I decided to walk up close to the side of the bed and peer down at the picture. As I approached, though, she hugged the frame to her chest to where I couldn't see anything. Just the little bit of remembrance that bedeviled her. She was giving up and was looking for a sign on what to do. Yet after being patient and waiting a few minutes, she held the picture back up again to display the image that was placed in the frame. The first thing that I saw was the man standing proudly on the left side, with a wide smile on his face, his ocean blue eyes staring at the camera and piercing the viewer. The same man that wore his formal red button-down shirt with the black vest and pants. However, as I looked to his wife on the right, she looked different. Staring at the photo, she had long blonde hair that was half up to make her look elegant, her brown eyes full of joy as she held a baby in her hand. Thinking long and hard about what was there, she appeared to be someone else compared to who she was now. The little baby boy also had blue eyes and had strands of black hair frizzing on the top of his head, his smile fully open as he appeared to be smiling as a 7-month-old. This entire picture made my eyes widen and gasp as the picture seemed to hit me close to home. However, as I looked towards the husband again near the top of the frame, I realized that 3 words were engraved into the holder. Those 3 words were what made me come to my epiphany. The Stone family. Immediately looking back at the picture, I realized that my wife and son were standing next to the second man. Ms. Haynes and Damien were not really the Haynes. They were the Stones. And if that was the case, the second man from my dreams and from the picture was me. Upon that sudden thought, sudden pains began to rush into my head. My brain was filling with voices and memories that I had no idea about. Yet as I allowed them to reveal themselves, the first one I saw was of me coming home from the hospital and kissing my wife. The next was of Damien sitting on his bed playing with his toys, and then finding me in the doorway and running to me for a hug. After that, it was Nala and I finding out about Damien's cancer. And finally, it was of Satan in his human form persuading me to sign his devilish contract. Then those same exact words sounded in my head to finish off my entire realization. You are mine! Upon the ending of that statement, everything faded, and I was left panicked. Looking at the woman on the bed with streaming tears, I understood who she was fully. This was my wife. This was Nala. And I have completely destroyed her world because of my foolishness. Because of my stupidity and grief, I ripped my own family apart and caused so much pain. They were more than just broken. They were disgraced. So much so that they didn't even use the family name anymore. I couldn't remember back then, but I realized their last name of Haynes was Nala's maiden name. She kept my disappearance a secret for years and refused to let my son tell anyone about it. That was when my reality really began to sink in. My son was still alive. He didn't have cancer and is currently 21 years old. Not only that, but he is now dating my protector child, the very kid that I was paired with over a year ago, and was actively sitting in the very same house listening to his side of things. Upon everything hitting me all at once, I glared at Nala again to realize it was really her. That was why these 2 people affected me so much. Why her cries drive me to want to comfort her, and why his blue eyes gave me such deja vu. My family was somehow in Wisconsin, and I was left clueless as to why.
Darius, I need to speak to you in the bathroom. Now!
She demanded. I didn't even say a word. I slowly backed up towards the door as quietly as possible. However, as soon as I was near it, I bolted through with the intangibility to run straight into the bathroom. Before realizing it, Abby was already within it and waiting for my arrival. She immediately closed the door upon my entry, while I went to the windowsill and leaned against it in bewilderment.
Darius and I stood in the bathroom flabbergasted by the situation at hand. I mean, there was a 1 in a billion chance that Damien was Darius' son, and somehow it was true. The man that I love was that young child from New York. He was the kid that Darius saved because of his deal. Satan somehow came through with his end of the bargain by curing his cancer. It magically went away and hasn't come back in any way. Even though the cancer he had mainly formed in children and teens, he was still examined for any other type of cancer since then. Yet nothing ever appeared. Now to this day, Damien has mourned his father's death for all these years and wants to recall him without his mother's denial. He still loved his father dearly and still feels somewhat connected with him even though he's gone. However, he doesn't even know how true that statement is now. His dad has been paired with me for the last year as my protector demon, and I couldn't even tell him that. I understood why I couldn't tell him before that I had a demon by my side almost at all times, but now the urgent feeling in my stomach kept insisting that I needed to run to Damien and tell him. Yet all he would do is think I'm playing a sick joke on him after exposing the most vulnerable part of himself. This was an extreme turn of events, and as soon as I found out about it, I called Darius to this exact spot to tell him. However, based on his entrance and how he clenched onto the window for support, I had a feeling he already knew what I was going to say. So as I stared at my boyfriend's father, I spoke. Darius, this is your family, I emphasized while still trying to be quiet. Instantly at my words, he sharply turned, and I could see the dread in his eyes.
You already know?
He screamed. Yes, that's why I called you into the bathroom. Damien told me everything about his past and how his real name was Damien Stone. He went on to tell me about how you just disappeared and how since then he has been forced to hide his true self. I'm dating your son.
But how is this even possible? Why would my wife and child be living in Wisconsin? We lived in New York when everything happened.
It's because of the gossip that came after your disappearance.
What do you mean by gossip?
Your son told me how you were one of the top doctors at Grandview Medical Hospital, and after you left, questions were raised. Your abandonment and disappearance was broadcasted on the news that you were missing, and everyone kept antagonizing Nala, asking her to bring you back and what she did to you. Even the hospital's CEOs kept pestering her about you. It got to the point where people seriously blamed Nala for your disappearance, and she fled out of New York to Washington, D.C. Yet they only lived there for a few months before Damien didn't understand why he couldn't say the Stone last name. Word got around again, and she chose to move to Wisconsin. Upon those words, his face grew paler by the second, his eyes full of terror while his breathing became shaky.
Damien and Nala were forced to start a new life because of my mistake? I have caused them all this pain and strife because of my deal. I will never be able to forgive myself for what I put them through,
he said choking on his words. Darius, you were trying to help your son. You were tricked into that deal, and you and I both know that.
But they don't.
He yelled, raising his hand to the door.
They don't know what happened and they never will. For all they know, I just banished them out of my life for good. I can never fix the mistake I made, and they are stuck here grieving and regretting their lives. I broke this family. I broke my son and wife's relationship. The family drama at Thanksgiving was because of me. Years and years of anguish they have suffered because of my actions.
After his slight rant, I ended up putting my hands up, signaling him that I had something to say. I knew there was nothing I could do or speak to make him feel better about the truth. The truth was that we were stuck with this information and had to pretend like everything was fine. I was staying in the bathroom for too long and needed to get back to Damien. So knowing that, I finally spoke. I know this is very complex and scary for you right now. It is for me too. But I can't stay in this bathroom forever talking to you about this. I have to go back to my boyfriend before his suspicions are raised.
How in the world do you expect me to continue on with this day knowing you're dating my son and my wife is in her room crying with a picture of us in her hand?
I know it's gonna be hard and that we are staying here for the weekend. However, I promise we will make it through today and we will discuss this later tonight within the demon world. Now, let's try and take a few deep breaths to calm down and go back. Darius didn't say anything and just closed his eyes, slumping his body over and clenching onto his knees. I took some deep breaths along with Darius to try and relax, yet I also actually went to the bathroom while he stepped out the door, using my intangibility still. As I finished, I opened the door and started traveling back to Damien. Darius kept behind me as I made my way through the kitchen. I could still hear his shaking breath as I couldn't even imagine being in his shoes right now. Being in such a state of perplexity and emotional agony to the point where you don't even know how to feel. I felt bad for him in the circumstance he was in, but I also had my own internal conflict about everything that was happening. I had to lie to my boyfriend and pretend like I didn't know his dad was standing right next to me. Even after he relieved himself from his lies and practically called me a saint. I still had to keep this to myself. And knowing about everything was going to be a struggle. I was going to despise every bit of it, and I wasn't looking forward to pretending I was fine. As I was lost in my thoughts, I suddenly saw that Damien was sitting on the couch in the living room playing on his phone. I jumped back a little in response because I wasn't expecting him to be there. I must have taken longer than I thought. I was 99% positive that he came up here to make sure that I was okay as soon as I came out of the bathroom.
Sorry, babe. I didn't mean to scare you. You were gone for quite some time. It was making me nervous, especially after I just opened up about my past.
Damien said, still staring at his phone, and remained a little somber. Yet he was more composed than what he was, which relieved me a little. I know, love. I'm sorry that I took longer than expected. I just had to take a phone call in the bathroom quickly. It was my mom calling about some gossip. I said, letting the knots twist in my stomach from the lie.
You're all good. Just give me 1 second so I can finish this level. Then, I'm all yours.
Okay, babe. With that, I turned my head a little to catch a glimpse of Darius in my peripherals. He was still standing behind me, but I could see that he was thinking and reflecting based on the face he was making. He still kept quiet and didn't make a sound, but I could still sense a little of his panic as he stared at his son.
Bam! I won. Now time to cuddle with my lady.
Damien yelled, closing the game. I started to smile at him because of how cute that sounded, and made my way to his side. I grabbed his arm and held it within my hand while he was exiting his game. However, my smile slowly started to fade when he placed his phone down and took in his environment. He lifted his head to turn it towards me, a smile appearing on his face and a twinkle shining in his eyes from the afternoon sun. Yet after a few seconds, his head turned away to the right while his eyes widened a bit. It was almost like he was struck with concern suddenly as he appeared to be staring at the hallway again. Confused at his reaction, I started to question him. Damien? Are you okay? What's wrong? Are you wondering if you should check on your mom?
No, it isn't that. I think I overstressed myself and now paying for it.
He stated, a little short of breath. What do you mean? Do you suddenly not feel good? I asked, holding his arm a little tighter. Looking at my demon quick, he stayed in his spot, but gazed at Damien now, seeing what the conflict was about. Yet he still kept quiet as I focused back on my boyfriend again.
I feel fine. Just distraught. I'm suddenly seeing things,
he said, continuing to stutter. Honey, I am sure it is nothing, but if you're certain, then please try and explain it to me. What exactly are you seeing? Damien then slowly brought his arm up and pointed towards the back wall of the dining room. Looking at the spot, I saw that he was pointing right at Darius. My eyes widened a little, but I knew I had to keep my composure. There was no way he was seeing Darius. Only I could see him. He must have been pointing to the back wall behind my demon. Are you seeing a shadow on the back wall? I asked with bated breath.
I don't see a shadow. I see some sort of man. Except he looks like a demon,
he finally stated, with his voice rising a bit. Darius glared at my boyfriend in shock, a slight gasp escaping his mouth. In disbelief, my demon pointed at himself and spoke out loud.
Wait, is he talking about me?
Immediately upon his words, Damien jumped back in his seat a little and started stuttering more.
He just asked if I was talking about him. Oh, I know, I seem crazy, but I swear he is real. He's standing right there.
Darius and I both looked at each other and then back to Damien. How the hell could he see my demon from hell? He wasn't Darius's protector child. So how could this be happening?
Abby? How the hell can he see me? You didn't do anything when you touched him, right?
Darius asked, glaring at me in terror.
What? Abby? You knew about this? Can you see him too?
At that question, my boyfriend turned his head back to me and waited for my answer. I was frozen in place as his ocean blue eyes stared into my soul, searching for my response. I could see that he was extremely puzzled and shocked like any other person would be. I mean, just remembering my freakout made me understand what he was going through. Regardless of that didn't make my job any easier. How was I about to explain that the demon standing across from us was actually his dad? A protector demon sent to defend me in any situation.
Sweetheart, please tell me the truth. If you can't see him, then say it. I want to be sure if I am overstressing myself or if this was something out of my control.
Damien, I said hesitantly. I see him too. I have seen him for a while now.
But how is this possible? How is there a demon just roaming up here freely? Why is he just standing there doing nothing? And how are you so calm about this? I know I don't practice religion like you do, but this is still crazy.
I know, it's crazy, I had a hard time trying to cope with the fact that a demon would be by my side for the rest of my life. When I first found out about him, I flipped out, and he can vouch for me, I said, pointing back to Darius. Damien turned his gaze to my protector demon again, trying to understand, my demon slightly nodding to prove me right. However, I could still sense the hysteria developing within his body. After that, my boyfriend gained eye contact with me again, and I continued my response. I didn't think this was possible either, especially from a religious standpoint. Despite that, though, he was still sent up here to be a protector demon for me.
What the hell is a protector demon?
It's a demon who is chosen to protect a random child on Earth. This snake and rose marking upon our arms pairs us together as protector demon and protector child,
Darius said softly, chiming in while pointing at his arm. Damien then let his sight down to peer at my arm and grabbed it gently to bring it up. His mouth opened slightly as he suddenly took in the marking. His finger began to scrape against the skin and feel the indents indicating its existence. As he used his sense of touch, he spoke out again.
This wasn't on your arm earlier. Why is it there now?
Because you couldn't see him or this before. But by some mysterious influence, you are now able to see it all, including the demon that has been paired with me.
But how come I can see these things now? What has changed within the span of 15 minutes that allowed me to visually see this mystic other world?
We all stayed quiet for a bit while I tried gathering my thoughts. I didn't know the exact answer to that, but I could make a good guess as to why. I turned my head to Darius to see his reaction to my thoughts. All he did was stare at me concerned and nervous at what I was planning to do next. Yet there was no other choice for me to make. I finally had to come clean about everything. This was it. So with one last intake of breath, I spun my head back to Damien and responded. The reason why you can see him is because we found out the truth about his past. It involves you and your mom. I have no other way of trying to tell you this gently. But Damien, this is your father, Darius. Damien's eyes widened even more while his mouth dropped a little. He swiveled his head to his father again, and I could see both of the men making eye contact. Neither of them dared to break the silence, and my boyfriend fully took in the sight of my protector. Continuing his strong gaze, Damien let go of my arm and stood up from the couch where we were sitting. As he straightened himself, Darius's eyes followed him upward and kept his concentration as he walked closer to approach. My boyfriend tilted his head up to look his father in the face, trying to examine him to find a piece of his human father that he could recognize. The quietness was almost too much for me to handle as the truth was now out. I wanted someone to say something, anything, to relieve the tension. Yet as I witnessed this interaction, I began to notice the similarities between the two. The broad shoulders, perfect posture, and even their hair were things I should have noticed earlier before this even happened. However, there was nothing I could do about it anymore. We found out the truth, and all we could hope for now was that more tragedy wouldn't come from it. After a moment or two, I saw Damien's facial expression change. He began to smile briefly and chuckled once in disbelief.
Dad? Is it really you?
He asked. Darius began to nod in response, trying not to explode into tears.
Yes, it is.
After a few seconds, Damien closed his mouth tight and quickly wrapped his father in his arms without warning. His father stumbled back from the unexpected embrace and moved his arms upward and out of the way in surprise. However, as soon as he realized what was happening and that his son was physically hugging him, He tried not to tear up and hugged his son back. I couldn't help but smile as the two rekindled with each other. I could physically see Darius trying to hold back his emotions. But as I watched his emotional barrier come crumbling down before my eyes, a few tears began to run down his face. After a minute, though, Damien pulled himself away, and Darius unwound his arms.
I have so many questions,
Damien said, still in arm's reach of his father.
I am sure you do, and I will do everything in my power to answer them for you. Whatever you want to know, I will tell you.
Well, I guess my main question would be how this happened. Why are you a demon? Did you ever leave New York?
No, Damien. I never left New York, and it was never my intention to leave you or your mother. I was trying to help you with your cancer by using the hospital resources. However, I was so desperate to find a cure that I was tricked into signing a deceitful contract.
A contract? With whom and for what? What does that have to do with me?
I made a deal with the devil on accident. He disguised himself as a human and told me he would cure you if I agreed to work for him at his hospital. However, I didn't find out his true identity until I woke up in hell. After signing his contract, I was forced to be a demon and do his bidding.
So you have been Satan's deal maker for all this time. Then how were you paired with Abby?
I was chosen for a job transfer apparently and ended up being her protector demon. I have been paired with your girlfriend for the past year. I just didn't know you were my son until now. I saw your mom in her room while you and Abby were downstairs. She pulled out a picture of her and I holding you when you were only a couple months old. Then all the pieces fell into place.
After that, Damien and Darius finally were finding the closure they both needed. Relieved to know what actually happened and why things turned out the way they were. However, that was only one part of the situation at hand. Part 2 had just opened the door to her bedroom and began walking down the hallway. Both of the men straightened themselves, and Darius turned himself around to face where his wife would appear. Actually, we all gazed at the hallway to find Damien's mom walked in and noticed her son standing in the dining room. Her eyes traveled back and forth between the human and the demon suddenly standing in her home. It was clear that she could see Darius. She looked almost as shocked as Damien did when he first saw him. However, her face expressed more panic than his, and she began to breathe heavily in fright.
Mom, I know what you're seeing. It is real. There is a demon in the house.
As her son stated that, she fully stared at him and verbally lashed out.
And this is just supposed to be okay? What the hell is happening? Why the hell am I seeing a demon in my house for? What is going on?
Mom, don't you recognize him? It's Dad.
What on earth are you talking about? Why would you say such a thing? Your father did not look anything like a monster. He vanished without a trace, leaving me and you alone. What kind of trick are you pulling here? This isn't funny, and I'm very disappointed in you.
Darius stood in place stunned while his pride was wounded. At that moment, I felt immense sympathy for him. Those words were like a stake penetrating through his heart, and I could feel the sting from it. Despite the blow, Damien also stood next to his father, flabbergasted. I saw him getting angry at her blasphemous statements, and I knew a fight was about to brawl out between Damien and Nala.
What do you mean you're disappointed in me? I didn't do anything wrong.
You are messing around with your father's memory and disgracing his name. I do not know how you are pulling this off, but I will not tolerate that in my house. I thought you told me you wanted to keep your father's memory alive and not let it disappear. Is this how you want to keep his legacy? Is this how you want to remember him?
Nala, don't yell at him like that. It's true. It's me, Darius.
He said, trying to defuse the fight between his wife and son. She immediately froze and her eyes widened from his remark. She couldn't find any words to say, so she just made incomprehensible sounds. Darius eventually, slowly, raised his hands to her and calmly spoke again.
I know this is very hard to believe and that I don't look like myself. But please, trust me when I say I never wanted to abandon you or Damien. If I would have known this was going to happen, I never would have made the decisions that I did.
Darius took a step closer and Nala backed herself into the side of the refrigerator.
No, this isn't real. I am just having an episode. I need to call a therapist or even a psychiatric ward. This isn't happening.
She cried, almost bursting into tears.
Nala, sweetheart, I swear to you that—
Stop! Don't come any closer!
She yelled, swatting her hands. Darius stepped back for a moment to dodge the first swing. He continued calling out her name, trying to get her attention. However, all she kept doing was swatting at him, trying to defend herself. Eventually, though, to keep himself safe, Darius grabbed a hold of both of her wrists and gently restrained her. Then quickly, before anyone could tell, they both froze in place, staring at each other.
I backed myself up against the refrigerator as this thing was stepping towards me. I was petrified out of my mind at what the hell was appearing in front of my eyes. This demon thing was claiming to be my husband, my love from 14 years ago who left without any warning. The man who abandoned his family and left me to raise our child alone. Meanwhile, my son and his girlfriend were behind this entity, letting him get closer to me. The both of them seemed fine while I was the only one talking at least a little bit of sense. There was no way this towering monstrosity was my beloved husband. No, this isn't real. I am just having an episode. I need to call a therapist or even a psychiatric ward. This isn't happening. I exclaimed, throwing my hands up as a barrier between me and the hellspawn. Despite my panic and verbal comment, that didn't stop him from approaching me fully. Realizing he didn't halt, I began to try and defend myself by throwing punches. The first swing I threw was dodged. Well, actually, none of them landed. It was honestly useless, as this entity was bigger and stronger than me. He had the advantage and ended up grabbing a hold of my wrists and began to restrain me. Within his grasp, I tried to fight back and break free, but I was stuck and was only growing more petrified by the second. I screamed in distress as he continued to call my name. Yet as I glared up into his eyes, waiting for him to strike, my vision suddenly became hazy, and I started seeing pictures of past memories. Being forced to watch, I began seeing flashbacks from when I was my younger self. First, I was dancing at a nightclub that I recognized to be Club Mahogany. I happened to gaze over my shoulder to find my future boyfriend staring right back at me. It was the very first moment that I saw him while dancing with some random guy. His face full of amusement while his eyes pierced through me. After that memory, the visual fast-forwarded itself to a different one. This time, I was sharing my first kiss with Darius after our first date. It was just outside my apartment complex on the stairs. The first moment where I truly started falling hard for him. After, I was recalled back to our first slow dance together on our wedding night. A room full of people, but their gazes on us as we happily slow danced to our song. The magical day where I called Darius my husband and I his wife. Then finally, one of the most important memories had summoned itself to the forefront. It was Darius Damien as a 7-month-old, and I taking our first family picture together professionally. Our son being the most giggly boy ever seen, while our hearts filled with joy. The first out of many where we were a happy family. After the 4 memories flashed before my eyes, they all stopped, and I was once again gazing back at the strange demon. Yet this time, as I gazed into his eyes, I started to feel a deeper connection somehow with this creature. Regardless of the horns upon his head, or the red color of his eyes and skin, I was still able to see the same eye design that he had compared to my husband. Along with that, his facial expression showed that recognizable tenderness and compassion that my husband always had towards me. Finally, after finding the similarities, my brain finally accepted the facts thrown into existence. The demon that I was gazing at was somehow my lost husband. Yet I didn't know how or if I could believe it.
Darius and Nala stared at each other for a few moments as if they were both in trances. They were both quiet as mice, at least until Darius was suddenly able to let go of her. Once he did, he displayed his fright and backed away, my demon's breath rapidly picking up while his wife's did also. Yet she remained against the fridge, as I quickly made my way next to my protector demon. "Darius, what happened?" I asked, grabbing his arm to stabilize his body.
I don't know.
He stated, holding his head slightly.
After I touched her, memories of my past began to show themselves, and I think she saw them too.
He continued to look at his hand, afraid that he had hurt his wife with whatever happened. Gazing back at Nala, I noticed how she was observing the interaction between us with bewilderment. Yet that wasn't enough to keep her silent.
Darius?
She stated, almost hesitant. At the call of his name, he turned his head to his wife, forgetting his own self-being and worrying about his love. He ended up being so concerned that he asked multiple questions about her well-being.
Nala, are you okay? I didn't hurt you, did I? Please tell me that you're alright.
No, you didn't. But I do want to ask one question before I can truly believe it's you. I need hard proof to know you're my husband besides whatever the hell just happened.
She paused for a minute and took in a deep breath. Darius stared at her intently, but a little perplexed as what she was exactly doing. Yet eventually she spoke again to ask him a question.
What was the name of the nurse practitioner that wanted to steal you away from me?
With that out in the open, Darius stood still, not replying. A moment passed and silence was still filling the room. I kept waiting with anticipation for my demon to answer the question, yet all I saw upon his face was distress, leading me to believe that he was trying to think of the name quickly, but couldn't remember it. Nala chuckled in disbelief and broke the quietness afterwards.
That's what I thought. I never told anyone that after my husband told me about it. He would be able to—
Cortana Hutchins.
Darius interrupted, finally gazing at Nala to make eye contact again.
What?
Cortana Hutchins was the nurse who flirted with me every day to try and sway me away from you.
Dad, someone tried sideswiping you from Mom?
Damien said, intruding on the conversation.
Yes. For years, she attempted to do so, but it never worked. She tried her hardest to the point where I filed 5 separate sexual harassment reports on her. I won't go into details because even I was disgusted by her actions. And I don't want to trigger any bad memories for Abby. Despite what I experienced and filed against Cortana, the hospital didn't do anything about it. They cared more about their reputation as a whole rather than their employees. Almost every day when I came home, your mother would ask me what her technique was for the day. I would tell her and she would laugh most times while I remained upset. But there were a few that she was unamused with.
Because some of them are things I did to you, and I somehow was able to keep you.
Nala said, stepping forward and away from the fridge and inching closer to her husband.
I was devoted to you and you alone. I am still devoted to you after all these years. I'm actively wearing my wedding ring.
He then proceeded to lift his hand to her, displaying the ring on his finger. Now, I remember suddenly seeing this ring on his hand for a couple months now. However, I never questioned what it actually was. At least not until now. At his statement, his wife gazed at it and gently lifted her own hand to find her diamond ring, displaying her marital status. After taking in all of that information, Nala broke down completely and started to cry.
Oh my God, honey,
she said softly, stepping even closer to him. At that point, they both met in the middle of the kitchen and stood only inches away. The emotional wife that was somewhat trembling again, touching her husband's chest in disbelief. At first, she was uncertain as to how she could suddenly touch her significant other. Yet despite her thoughts, she continued to run her hands down to his waist and grabbed a hold of his textured shirt, crumpling it within her grasp. As that was happening, Damien backed himself up from his father and decided to move beside me. On instinct, I wrapped my arms around him to give comfort within the moment. His mom and himself finally found their head of the family, and I couldn't imagine what kind of emotional roller coaster they were on right now. Yet as I wrapped myself around him, he embraced me as well, while his parents interacted more.
What in the world happened to you? Why do you look like this?
Nala asked with tears in her eyes. My protector demon maneuvered his arms up to grab a hold of her arms, returning the amount of touch she gave him. He breathed a heavy exhale as if those questions brought him immense pain and sorrow. My eyes could see that a tear started to roll down her cheek, but Darius brought his hand to her face and began to wipe away the fallen drops of water.
It's a long story, and I promise to tell you everything. I just want to know where you want me to start.
I'm not trying to sound selfish, but some of the things I want to know need to be talked about in private. I don't want you to answer right now. What's important now is that you are somehow here and able to connect to your son again.
Mom, if you seriously want to talk to him first by yourself, you can. Abby is staying for the weekend. We can talk to him later.
Damien intruded, wanting to give his parents some space to reconnect again.
Why would it matter if Abby stays overnight or not? Not trying to be rude. I do like you, Abby, and I love you in every way. However, I don't get the connection you have in this.
Nala, the whole reason why I am here is because of her.
Darius said, gently letting go of Nala.
What do you mean?
At the question, my demon then started to walk away from his initial spot to head towards me. When he was only a few feet in front of Damien and I, he paused as if his path was obstructed. My boyfriend saw the look on his father's face and nodded in acknowledgement as he began to let go of me. I followed him in response, but he fully stepped away to leave me standing alone. I peered my head up to see Darius continuing to walk again and placed himself right beside me to replace the missing body. Nala obviously stared at us puzzled as Darius didn't say anything, which left her to ask questions.
Darius, what connection do you have with her? How did she bring us together again?
I am a protector demon to her. and I have been for the past year. And before you ask, it is just as it sounds. I was sent up here to protect Abby. If it wasn't for that, this wouldn't have been a possibility. Without this job, I wouldn't have known you were my family. If Abby wouldn't have known Damien, none of this would have became a reality.
Nala then gave out a slight gasp and brought her hand to her mouth. The truth was finally starting to settle in, and the understanding of the situation deepened. I saw another tear roll down her face as she glanced at us, almost happily at me. My face began to redden with embarrassment from the sudden praise and wanted to lose the attention. So, to do just that, I looked up at Darius. Yet as I did, I saw him staring down at me with a smile on his face as well. He had that same amount of sentiment, except I understood why he was displaying such happiness. To him, I was one of the best things that ever happened in his life. Being my protector demon was the main cause of this even being possible. I mean, what Darius said was partially true also. Because of me knowing Damien, it did help bring them together as a whole. But I couldn't control him being assigned to me as a protector demon. It was all just a huge coincidence. Ironic. A circumstance that was somehow gifted to him. However, I didn't want to ruin the moment for anyone and kept the thoughts to myself. Eventually, I brought my head back down again to see Miss Haynes walking closer to me until we were face to face. We stood eye level to each other, and I could see her sorrowful yet relieved hazel eyes. Her mouth quivered a little as she was trying to keep her composure. I was ready to explain myself to her about knowing Darius for all this time, yet she did something totally different. She ended up grabbing a hold of my body and wrapped me in a hug. I froze for a second in shock, but began to hug her back upon realizing what happened. She squeezed me hard, as her emotions were getting the best of her. I could feel her chin digging into my shoulder a little as she seemed to cling to me for dear life. As that happened, I think Darius heard my thought, for the next moment he placed his hand upon her back to signal her to be careful. Once his presence was known, she broke up the hug between us and began to interact with me instead of her husband.
Thank you, Abby. I can't even tell you how much this means to me,
she whimpered. Miss Haynes,
You can call me Nala,
she exclaimed, interrupting my words.
But if you want to keep it formal, just call me Mrs. Stone. No more Miss Haynes, please.
She gently touched my face and caressed my cheek. Once again, I could see the joy in her eyes that this whole situation brought her. She has been grieving for 14 years because of the disappearance of Darius. But now she could finally dry her eyes, mostly knowing that she was about to find out the forbidden truth about what happened to her husband. Mrs. Stone, I really didn't have control over your husband being paired with me. I was just as shocked as you were when I first found out about the arrangement. It took me a while to trust and adapt to it, but I finally came to terms with it. Furthermore, I do want to tell you that your husband is still a great man, even though he may not appear to be by his demonic features. I can't even tell you how many times he has helped me or even saved me within this past year of us being paired together. He has talked about you and Damien a lot, and I enjoyed hearing everything he had to say. You are very lucky to have a zealous man such as Darius. After my short rant, Nala proceeded to kiss me on the forehead and thanked me for the kind words. Then, Nala stuck out her hand towards Darius, gesturing for him to grab it. He did without delay, and he walked next to her side while Damien came to mine.
Well, I know that this has been an eventful afternoon, but if it is okay with you both, I would like to talk to Nala in private and straighten things out.
Darius spoke, breaking the silence for the final time. Damien and I nodded, agreeing with his statement. Once it was acknowledged, Darius and Nala turned themselves around and began to step away. As they walked off, the final picture was set into my head. The two lovers were smiling at each other for the first time in years, being able to settle their regrets and finally talk about what has happened.
This has been Chapter 23, The Forbidden Truth, from the book, The Forbidden Truth. Tune into the next video for Chapter 24. Thank you for listening.